was 9 months ago, March 1st, and I was waking up out of a sleepy-induced state, and I was wheeled in a wheelchair into a small room where a doctor was sitting in the printouts. And I was wheeled up to the desk, and I was the first to speak. And I said, "So what did you find?" And he said, "Polyps, hundreds of polyps, thousands of polyps." And I was very serious when I asked him, "Are you joking?" And he wasn't. And then I kind of processed this for a second, and I said, "Am I going to have a bag like my dad?" And he said, "Well, there's various surgical routes that you can follow." I was wheeled out, and the nurse with whom I had been joking very jovially before my colonoscopy, we both had a hard time to have anything to say to each other. And I had tears coming down my face as I got into the passenger seat. And I was thinking, how am I going to tell my family? On the car ride home, I called my father. I said, "Dad, I have FAP." And very few people would understand what that diagnosis was, except for him, because he had it. FAP is a very rare genetic mutation. And for example, in Manhattan at the hospital that I would go to, 100 people in 25 years had been seen with FAP. At Albany Med, 50 people in 25 years had FAP. My father was trying to reassure his daughter, and he said, "Don't worry, the technology today, they can zap out those polyps." And I said, "No, Dad, it's carpeted," to use the doctor's words, the whole entire large intestine and the rectum. Some of them are 2 centimeters big. So I went home, and I had to give the news to my mother. I was living with my mother at the time. And my grandmother was there too. And I think it's safe to say that they were devastated. But how could I tell my son? He was just 4 weeks old. So the next few weeks and months, actually month and a half, was filled with doctor visits and more endoscopies to remove polyps up here and biopsy, waiting on the results. And I hated Lois. She was the doctor's secretary, and she took forever to get back to me. And we were all hanging to know if I had cancer or not. The results would come back negative after all these tests, but the Cancer Institute here in Glens Falls would still say, "We don't really know until we open you up." At this time, I had a theme song, and it was Space Odyssey by David Bowie. And the song would say, "Take your protein pills and put your helmet on." And it was very modern in tone. And when I did have my first out of 5 CAT scans, I'd go into this space donut where they injected you and gave you, it was supposed to feel like whiskey, and they told you it would feel like you peed your pants, or one woman said like you had an orgasm, but that didn't happen to me. But we joked, the lady, everybody that I met, we always joked, me and all of the nurses that have come along my way. But this futuristic feeling of kind of the liftoff, the countdown in the song, 10, 9, 8, was the countdown to my major surgery, when I would have to say goodbye to my baby and go down to New York City for at least 5 to 7 days. And I had been the one taking care of him every day. The morning that I had to leave for the city, I held my baby close and I danced with him to the song. And it allowed me to cry, because I really didn't cry this year, believe it or not. But the feeling of being cut off and, "Major Tom, can you hear me? Your circuit's dead, there's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom?" It really made my experience real in a way that talking with other people really couldn't do, and still probably doesn't, except for maybe now. So I had my surgery in the city, and it was 8 hours long, and I woke up and I felt like I had been in Vietnam, and very disconnected from the reality around me, very disconnected from what had happened. And it was over the next 24 hours that I learned that I had an 8-inch incision with sutures all up here, and I had an ostomy bag over here, and had drainage tubes over here and a drainage tube out my butt, and things were coming out of me, and I really couldn't walk. There was a lot to say, details that I won't really give, but there was basically physical hell for about 8 or 9 days. And I plugged through, and my sister was with me because I preferred my mother to be at home to give a motherly presence to my baby, my son. And his father left work in Utica to come over and be with my baby. So while the physical hell was going on, and the nausea and the people sticking tubes down my nose to drain my stomach and all kinds of things, I just kept thinking, I hope that my son doesn't have to go through this. And when the physical stability came, it was really the emotional that really was more painful, I would say. That was when I was crying. So I remember one morning sitting on the beautiful terrace on the 15th floor of Sloan Kettering with my sister, and you can hear the taxis honking down here, and haven't been out of the hospital in like 9 days, and I don't feel any connection to the real world because that's where my son is and I'm not there. And this little boy came out in his daddy's arms, and that was a real moment because I saw a baby boy hooked up to an IV in a diaper, and I just was thinking about my son, and I tilted my head back and I just started crying these tears. And it must have moved another cancer patient because a few minutes later, a man who was sitting out here by himself just started breaking down, crying all by himself. And I didn't know what to say to him. So the results came back. I didn't have cancer. That was good. I found that out before I left. And then finally the day came that my mom could drive down and get me. And she did her happy dance down the hallway, making nurses laugh, and I videoed it, and it got like over 100 likes on Facebook. My mother's happy dance. And then we set back for New York, up here, upstate. I wasn't doing well though, and my ostomy kept on producing too much water, and I wasn't well, and I had pushed the doctors to let me leave early, because you got to be an advocate, right? So the great moment came, like 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes of the car ride were excruciating because I could not wait another second to see my baby. And I was very weak, but I got out of the car and made my way up to the front door, and his father was holding him, and he was like so much bigger and different looking. And I couldn't hold him for the next 2 months. Couldn't carry or lift my son because of my stitches. But I sat there, and as my uncle had predicted, I bathed my baby's head in my tears. The next morning I wound up having to go to the ER, and I wasn't well, and I think I had to be readmitted and possibly ambulanced down. There was, over this past summer, a lot of ER trips, and 4, and readmissions and minor surgery from cellulitis, from my ostomy. There were a lot of complications, and I was very stoic through everything. Physically, nothing mattered, and it still doesn't matter. It was the inconvenience of having to find care for my son and worrying every time I left that mommy's going to be gone. And sometimes I didn't handle that very well, right? But everything else was handled with a lot of joking to get me through, and a lot of good cheer and just acceptance. And I had my second surgery in September, and 2 more months where I had to pay somebody to help me every day to lift my son. And now I've been lifting him for a month now, and I feel wonderful. And it's taken me all this time to, I don't think I've processed any of it, except for this storytelling. This time last year, I was very pregnant. I was 8 months with this, oh baby. The thing about FAP is that it's 100% chance you'll have colon cancer by age 40. I'm turning 39 in 2 weeks. And there are FAP patients I've read about that had colon cancer at age 19 and 20. The polyps I've had since I was a teenager or before. They've been growing this whole time. Some of them were 2 centimeters big. It was high-grade dysplasia. It was about to turn to cancer. I was very conscious of my health, and I was a vegetarian for 15 years. was very healthy. I never got a colonoscopy. So basically what I'm saying is that my son saved my life, because him growing inside my belly, that pressure gave me such bad symptoms in my 8th and 9th that it was screaming, go to a doctor. But had I not had my son, I'm pretty sure that I still wouldn't have had a colonoscopy, and I still wouldn't have had any symptoms, and I still would have to find out that I had a very upward battle for my family, more my mother and my grandmother and my father to face. So my son saved my life. And then the other side of that is, had I had a colonoscopy, I would have had to have my organs removed, and I would not have been able to have a child. So my miracle, and that's the title, is that